Cool. Hey, we are starting a brand new series tonight. This one is called Swipe Right. And I don't really need to tell you guys this because you get this more than anybody else in the world right now. But we are a people that are very, 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 very dependent on our phones, are we not? We're just it's a technological age, and it's something that we do more and more and more. And then, I found out this number that I thought was kind of crazy, okay? The average American, now this is the average, we're like including people in their 80s in this, okay? I think for teenagers this is different. The average American checks their phone 150 times a day. 100, yeah. So, they're just like, that's nothing. I'm assuming that was you, Kyla. I don't know, but I'm just going to throw it at you. I don't know. Yeah, 150 times a day. So if that was the case, then 150 times a day, that would be that you would be checking your phone once every 6 minutes, okay? And I think for a lot of us, it's more frequent than that, which is really sad. And if that was the case, if you were so compelled that you could not say no, then you would be taking your phone out of your pocket and checking it 5 times before I get done with this message. And that'd be lame. So don't do it, please. I would really appreciate it if you didn't. Unless you're listening to me and you're like, wow, Shua makes the most compelling points, and I just need to collect these notes. Then you can do it, but otherwise you don't have a good excuse, all right? So don't do it. But you'd be checking it every 5 minutes, which is just kind of crazy. And I don't know, does anybody do this? Like, raise your hand if this is you. I always wonder when I say like that, raise your hand if you did it. Thank you. Every time I say raise this hand, your hand if this is you, someone always raises their hand before I even say the thing. So, you know, we use our phones for a lot, right? I use it for communication. I use it to watch videos. I use it to buy things on Amazon, a whole bunch of stuff. Now, is this you? When you're walking around in school in the halls or you're at the mall, right? And you have no reason to look at your phone. In fact, you don't even want to look at your phone, but you're walking, right? And then all of a sudden, if you're like me, you see a human, right? Yeah, a human in the hall. And you're walking and you know that you're gonna have to make eye contact and you might need to have a short conversation with them. And so if you're like me, you pull this thing out and you're like, oh no, this is really important. And you make it look like you're like writing a term paper or something on your phone. Does anybody do that? Anybody? This is a tick that I do. It's really, yeah, it happens all the time. And I almost can't control it. You know, there's research done on this right now on how much time we spend on our phones. And the research is saying this, that you and I, especially your generation, is developing a thing called phantom vibration sensation. Want to say that with me? Phantom vibration sensation. That'd be like a really good 70s song, I don't know. And so what this is, I think you guys know what I'm talking about, right? When you get a text or a notification on your phone, if it's set to vibrate, it goes bzz, right? And you feel it. And then you pick it out and you look and you're like, oh. And there's this thing about this that scientists have found, okay, when you get a text message or when you get a notification and you see that someone commented on something you did or they liked your photo or they're following you, you're literally getting this hit of dopamine, right, in your brain that is saying, that feels so good. It's like the part that's like, they like me. I like being liked. Like me more, okay? And that's what it is. And so we've become so dependent on this hit of dopamine and this desire so that all of a sudden you're sitting there and I'll be talking and you're going to feel your pocket buzz. You will. You'll just be like, You ever do this? And you pick it up and you're like, oh, there's not I thought there was something, right? And then a few minutes later, like, oh, well, I don't have a message, but I'm just going to sit around on Pinterest and I'm just going to check my Instagram, right? It's this thing that a lot of us can relate to, this phantom vibration sensation. And what it is your brain is literally craving that dopamine hit. So we are a people that are so attached to our phones, are attached to constant communication, and we're also what I would call the fast food culture. What I mean by that is when we want something, we want it right now. We do not want to wait for our videos to buffer. We do not want to wait for our food to cook. We want it as soon as physically possible. And so if we use our phones for communication, for videos, for shopping, for music, for just about everything, why not bring in the realm of relationships and sex? Why not? You know, and this might shock you, but it's been done. Yeah, I know, it's pretty surprising. You guys might have heard of a little thing called Tinder. Anybody heard of that one? Yeah? No? Like no, right? This little thing. And what Tinder has done is it's this app that really has created something, and now we see it in a lot of different places, but they have defined this feature called swiping, right? And the concept of swiping with this, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an education lesson, okay? Now, some of you in this room don't know what I'm about to talk about. You're going to be like, what is this Tinder thing? And you're going to be very intrigued by what I'm about to say. The other half of you know all too well exactly what this app is. You have used it before, okay? And as I'm talking about it, here's my advice to you. My advice to you is to look up and look very confused while I talk and be like, what? Oh, and then look to your person next to you and be like, can you believe that? That's terrible. And that'll be great. Just make sure your phone's on silent so you don't accidentally get a notification, because that'd be super awkward, okay? So this is how Tinder works. Really, really simple, okay? You get a picture, someone's like sexy face, right? They're like, I'm trying to look super cute photo, and you get this, and you have a choice. And we're gonna take everything that is complex and crazy about relationships and dating and sexuality and all this stuff, and we're gonna dilute it down to the single most simple thing it could possibly be. And the question is this: hot or not? Are they hot or not? That is all Tinder does. And so you get this image on your phone, and if you find them hot, you swipe right. And if they're not hot, you swipe left. And then this magical thing happens. If you swipe right and that person swipes right, then congratulations, you guys can hook up. You know, that's the way that this thing is designed. Now, I want to make sure you hear me correctly. We are not talking about a dating app. That's not what this is. This isn't about that. This isn't about finding your boyfriend or your girlfriend. Or maybe some of you guys are like hopeless romantics and like, well, maybe I could find my forever person on there. Maybe I could find my husband or my wife or my future, the grandpa to my grandbabies. That is not the point of this app. No, the point of this app is, are they hot? Are they not? And how fast can I end up in a situation, okay? And this is our culture. This is something that we have wrapped around this idea. Our fast food culture loves this concept. And really what it is we've taken everything difficult and complex about relationships, and we said, no, let's make it simple. You get this image, and all you can tell is, do they turn me on or not? That's all I get. What you don't get is, are they smart? Are they stupid? Are they a slob? Are they a jerk? Or do they have a good moral compass? Well, it doesn't matter, because that's not what you're looking for in this thing. And this is kind of what our culture has gone to. There's this article that I was checking out for this, and what it looked at was really college age and young professionals, so young professionals in their 20s and 30s who have adopted this. And they've adopted this for a big reason. Dating's hard. It is. There's a lot involved in dating. There's a lot involved with a relationship and a commitment and the drama of it all. So why not just go for what's easy? And this is what some of them had to say. There's two different things here. One is this. This guy said he'll fire up Tinder, and then he said by midnight he could be sleeping with someone. Dang, that's fast. Okay? He's like, I'll just fire it up. Boom, 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 swipe. There's my Monday. Boom, 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 swipe. There's my Thursday. Problem solved for this guy. All right? Then this girl wrote this, and this is a girl in her mid-20s, and she wrote, you know, most guys, they're just not interested in dating. They're interested in hitting it and quitting it. So I can use Tinder to hit it and quit it and no strings attached. Casual encounters, listen to this, as easy as calling an Uber. That's how she described it. This thing where you've got two people, two souls coming together in one of the most intimate things that you could possibly do with another human being. And it's been so diluted and shrunk down to the point that it's just as easy as calling an Uber. It's messed up. And that's the world we live in. There's actually a really interesting parallel to this in the book of Exodus. I want you guys to check this out. This is Exodus chapter 15, verses 22 through 24. A little context for this. Raise your hand if you've heard of Moses. You've heard of the character Moses. Okay, that's the majority of the room. You probably heard about this concept where Moses, the Israelites were in Egypt. They had been slaves for 400 years. And then God called Moses and said, hey, Moses, go to Pharaoh and say, let my people go. I'm getting you guys out of there. So Moses is like, cool. He goes to Pharaoh. He says, let my people go. Pharaoh says, no. And then Moses goes back. And Pharaoh says, no. And then God sends 10 plagues at the Egyptians. And after every single one, Moses is like, let him go? And he's like, no. Okay? Finally, after the last one, Pharaoh is so sick of these Israelites. He does not want them, so he says, fine, leave, get out of here. And in that moment, he told thousands of Hebrew slaves who literally, like they're the ones who did almost all the work and their economy was built on them. He just let them go free, okay? So these thousands of people, they pack up, they load up all their gear, they get their water, they're ready to go, and they start going. And then all of a sudden, Pharaoh has this realization, oh no, like everything's gonna crumble if they leave. So he gets his army together and they're gonna put an end to this. And then this miracle happens, right? This miracle happens at the Red Sea. God, yes, the staff, yes, thank you. And the sea separates and the Israelites make it through, and then God closes it over the Egyptians, and awesome. This miracle has happened, and now the Israelites are completely free for the first time in 400 years. Huge. That's the Exodus story, at least part of it. That's the part that people kind of know. This is the story that happens right after. So they had packed up, they had got their water, they were ready to hit the road, and so they're going, and you have to understand that there's a ways to go from where they were in Egypt to get to the Red Sea. So they're journeying, their supplies are getting less and less and less and less and less. Then they make it to this Red Sea, and in the movies they make it seem like it all happened in like 15 minutes, but that's not how the Bible tells it. It was actually this very slow thing. They had to wait there for a long time, or a period of time. Supplies are going down, 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 down. Now you'd think, as their water supply is getting less and less and less, hey guys, you're at this huge body of water, fill up. Well, that'd be a really terrible idea because the Red Sea is one of the saltiest bodies of water on the planet. So their water supply is getting smaller and smaller, and they're right next to water, but they cannot refill. Then God does this miracle. He gets them through the Red Sea. Awesome. And they head off, and that's where we are in this story. Exodus 15:22 says this. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea. Then they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. Okay? Now, when they came to Marah, they could not drink the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore, the name of it was called Marah. Literally, Marah just means bitter, so they're super creative, okay? They named the water bitter, they named it that, okay? And the people complained against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? This is one of those stories in the Bible that you could go by so fast and just be like, okay, Red Sea happened, they're thirsty, okay, and you keep turning and you go. But you need to put yourself where they were. Imagine that you are those people. You've just left Egypt. You've just watched God do this incredible miracle, but your supplies are getting lower and lower and lower. You make it through the Red Sea, and then you start heading towards this promised land that you know God has promised to your ancestor Abraham. And it's amazing. This is so huge for them. And they start going on their journey, but the supplies are getting lower and lower, and they're in a wilderness. This is a desert region. It's super dry. So just imagine these guys, they're parched, it's dry, they're tired, their lips are chapped. Can you feel that? And then 3 days goes by. Day 1, day 2, day 3, and they're going and they're going, and they're feeling like, is this ever going to end? And then someone in the distance sees water. And like if you're in a desert, you'd think it was a mirage, right? So everyone's like, oh, I hope it's real, I hope it's real. Oh man, it is. And you imagine the joy that these guys had. I could just imagine them sprinting and diving into the water and just trying to drink as much as they could. But the moment that it touches their tongue, they have to spew it back out because the waters are bitter. It's like they're contaminated. You cannot drink this water. And just imagine how depressing this would feel. For their entire lives, they have been slaves. They have never known freedom. They finally get out of Egypt, and now they're convinced that they're going to die of dehydration right next to a lake. Can you imagine? I think of like people who shipwreck in the ocean. Can you imagine dying of dehydration, floating on the largest body of water on the planet? It'd be the saddest thing, and that's where they are. And when it says that they complained to Moses, you would too. If you were convinced that they're asking themselves this horrible question: was it better for us to be slaves in Egypt than this? If this is what freedom is. That's the situation that they're in. And I'm calling this message water everywhere and not a drop to drink. Water everywhere, not a drop to drink. Everywhere they looked, Red Sea, this lake at Mara, and they can't have any of it. Now, I think this is just a really strong metaphor for our world, for the situation that we're in. Stick with me here. You and I are surrounded by a sea of sexual images, of sexual pressure, okay? It's like everywhere you look, in conversations with your friends, and as stuff that you encounter at school. When you look at billboards, you see these images that you never wanted to see before, right? You're watching TV, all of a sudden it's like, oh, naked. You're watching movies, naked. You're watching Netflix, naked. Everywhere you look, it's naked. It's like, everything is naked. Everything is cool when you... It's funny, but it's all around us. It's all around us. And here's the thing with this sea of sexuality that we have around us. This is the trick, and this is where it kind of compares to what they had. It's a deceiving thing that sin does. There's sexual stuff everywhere. You could take part in relationships. You could take part in pornography. You could indulge in all these different ways. But the trick that sin does that doesn't tell you is the more that you choose to consume it, the more that you take it in, the less and less satisfying it will be, the more and more disappointing and discouraging and empty it will be. I've known a lot of guys, and I can say this from my own life, a lot of guys who have struggled with pornography or have been in relationships and hooking up and just kind of let their lives just go rogue in this way, have experienced something that I think as soon as I start talking about it, a lot of you are going to get. Because it's not just a sex thing. This is a sin thing. Okay, you can think about the same thing when it comes to drug use. Okay, you hear the same thing, and it's this: sin. Period can be fun. Like, I would be doing you guys a disservice to say, hey, sin's always terrible and you're gonna hate it. No, there's a reason we give into it, because at least for a moment, at least for a fleeting moment, it seems superior to something else. It seems worth it. It seems fun. And every person I've ever known who's given in to a particular sin, started looking at pornography, started hooking up like crazy, when they first start doing this, it seems so great, right? There's literally this build-up, there's this excitement, there's this fact that you know it's wrong and you know it's taboo and you know you shouldn't do it, and there's this weird thing in our broken human hearts that as soon as we know we shouldn't do something, we kind of crave it, right? And so when you give in at first, it's like I'm not making this up, because pornography has been compared to drug use and its addictiveness and how it lights up your brain in a very similar way to heroin and other hard drugs. And when you give into it at the beginning, there's this high that you get. It's scientific, okay? It's there. There's this high. It seems great. It seems worth it. And you hear about this with drug users a lot, that when they first use this drug, man, the high was incredible. But this is where I think some of you are going to really relate to this. If you struggle with a sin long term, have you noticed, don't have to raise your hands, but have you noticed in your own life that the longer you give in to a sin and the more ground that it takes in your life and the longer you're struggling with that sin, that the amount of pleasure that you experience goes down? I can say this in my own life. I know this is true. And you see it in drug users, where the initial high, the initial race, the initial crazy intensity, that suddenly they have to start going for more and more extreme measures and more diversity to try to get the same kind of rise out of them. And there's a reason for this. This is a trick of the devil. This is a trick of sin. And I want you guys to hear this, whether this is your struggle or not. Sin always overpromises and underdelivers. Sin will always overpromise and underdeliver. There's an article in Time magazine, this was 2 years ago, 2016, they wrote this. And they wrote that this article because pornography is being studied by a lot of different scientific outlets, and they're realizing that right now, a generation is alive something is happening in brains that has not happened before. Because prior to like the last 10 years, we have never had access to pornography like there is today. It just wasn't there. The access to images and videos and stimulation like crazy wasn't there, and it's literally physically doing things to our brains. They found that porn is a drug that's proven to be as addictive as heroin. It lights up those same centers of the brain that drugs do, and it's causing people listen to me. And if you're in this room and you think this isn't an issue, I want you to hear this. It's causing people to be conditioned to only be satisfied in a certain context. To be conditioned to only find satisfaction in a certain context. This is how it works. The arousal addiction, that's what it is, an addiction to be aroused, is fed by images moving and pulsing. At the click of a button, you can get to a new person and another video and another image and another and another and another and another and another. And that's kind of how this struggle goes. Or through apps like Tinder, through a swipe and a swipe and a swipe, you can hook up with this girl, you can hook up with this girl, you can change it up. And we are learning and training ourselves that is the condition where we can be satisfied. And so now, this is Time Magazine. This is not a Christian outlet. This is Time Magazine reporting this. There's a whole generation of young people who are reporting to them that when they get to be with an actual person and clothes are off and they're in the bedroom, what they're finding is it's never enough. That they've gone so far down this path that they can no longer feel satisfied with an actual flesh and blood person because their brains have been conditioned to only be satisfied by something fake and false. Man, this is so sad. They've trained themselves to not be able to enjoy sex anymore. So what I'm saying with this is this concept that there is sex everywhere you look, images and influences, and not a drop to drink. Kind of reminds me of pineapples. Best transition ever. I don't know if you guys knew this about this magical fruit, but I want to tell you guys something. Around the year 1500, when we had people like Christopher Columbus and all these guys coming to the New World, they found this mystery magical fruit, okay? And when they found this fruit, they looked at it and they thought, this is unbelievable. This is incredible. We must have it. And so they brought it back to Europe, and people lost their minds, okay? They did. First of all, the name. You look at this thing, it's like, well, it kind of looks like a pine cone. And when you bite it, it's juicy like an apple, so pineapple. Okay, really well done, guys, just like Mara. And they looked at this thing, and they thought it was mysterious and alien. And since they were so small in numbers, and it was so hard for them to transport them over the Atlantic to get to Europe, people thought this thing was amazing. Okay, for real, this was the glamour fruit of the day. And if you look at art and architecture of the time, you actually see, you can go to St. Paul's Cathedral, and you will see paintings of giant pineapples on this majestic ceiling. I'm not kidding. You will find giant statues. People associated this with wealth, with fame, with status. And okay, if you adjust for inflation for how much these things cost, what they would pay for a single pineapple today would cost $8,000, all right? $8,000 for just one. Now imagine how poor people were at this time in history. They would get one to show off, but get this. They would never cut into it and eat it. No, they would buy this thing and they would put it in their house, and then they would invite all of their neighbors over. And I'm not kidding, they would do viewing parties. And they would talk it up and then be like, you want to see? Right? Super weird, okay? And they would have all these parties, and they would just let it sit there and rot and get disgusting and turn into goop, all so that they could say, like, people would literally tell their friends, I saw a pineapple once. Life-changing, life-altering. At this time in history, this was a glamour fruit. This was beautiful. This meant that you had power. Now, fast forward to today. You can go any grocery store, anywhere, and get this thing, right? It's like when you get like the variety pack of fruit, and you ever notice that when people put pineapple with other fruits, the other fruits take on the flavor of the pineapple and it kind of ruins the whole thing? I'm not okay with this, people. Not okay. SpongeBob doesn't live in there, I don't think. I don't know. You're right. I do care more about Gary than SpongeBob in this situation. Now you fast forward to today, and they're so common, they're so everywhere. Nobody would pay that kind of money for this thing. Nobody would do a viewing party. That's so weird. It's become so commonplace that actually when you look at like rankings of fruit, it's not even that high on the list. Things have changed, but what has changed? In those 500 years, what has changed? The pineapple is mostly the same thing. What has changed is our attitude towards it. At one point in history, it was in a place of such honor and such secrecy and such glamour that people would literally go and stare at a pineapple for hours and just behold it. And now it's just commonplace. And I think that this is a really strangely perfect picture for what's happened to sex today. Because as God designed it, here's the thing. As God designed it, you and I would only experience sex in this one very specific, very guarded, very controlled context, this super safe place that God designed, and that would be marriage. That would be the marriage bed. That is meant to be the one place that you and I experience it. There would only be one person that you would ever be fully naked and fully exposed and fully unashamed in front of. And I want you to hear this, guys. You would never be lying next to your partner and thinking and comparing their performance or the way they looked to people that you've had sex with in the past. You'd never be laying there next to your partner and you can't get these ideas and pictures out of your head that you looked at once when you were in like 6th grade. And you can't get them out and you can't forget them because nobody tells us that you can look at pornography in just a second, but it takes years, decades, sometimes it takes the whole life for that thing to ever remove from your mind. The goal of this series, why we're talking about this, why we're gearing up to this, why I hope that you guys will come back and listen in and dive into what we're about to talk about is that there is a better way. That the way that God has designed sex is not for you to feel like your fun has been taken away. Like people have this idea about church and when we talk about sexuality, that the idea is this. God's like this angry old guy in the sky who's frowning at you and he's literally just like, thou shalt not have a good time. That is not our God. Our God is not one who's trying to steal away your fun, who's trying to remove experiences from you. In fact, let me show you this, okay? Listen up, this is important. God created sex. He did. He created it. He designed it. He made it. And you could think, like some people think that sex is like just literally about making babies. Like that's what it's about. It's like, oh, we should probably procreate and have a child. Boom, there we go. And God could have made it this super boring thing. That's how he could have designed it, but he chose not to. Instead, our God designed it in such a way that it would be life-giving and exciting and passionate, okay? And I feel like we don't say this at church very much, and I want you guys to hear this even at your age. God doesn't want to keep you from having sex. In fact, your Creator wants you to have amazing sex, the best kind. And that's why he cares so much that you understand what that means and where that is. God created sex. He designed it to be awesome. And I want you guys to look at literally like creation, right? You look at creation, God makes Adam. God looks at Adam and he's like, man, he's lonely. I got to fix that. So he goes to sleep. He pulls a rib out of his rib cage and then boom, there's Eve. And Adam wakes up. And the first gift that God gives humanity is this relationship. It's marriage. It's this freedom. And if you think like, well, I don't think God intended for that to be about sex. God literally put a naked wife in front of him. Like I think he knew what was going to happen next. So this is part of the way that he designed it. This is part of the way, and I don't think too, like sometimes we get this idea about God, like he's prudish and he's like looking at Adam like, don't be a pervert. That's not the situation that we're talking about. Instead, God was like, hey, I made this for you. And this is a precious thing. And now we're going to do this wedding ceremony, the first wedding that's ever happened. And then he explains how this should happen. He explains what this should look like, and he gives that first command. In Genesis 2:24, can we throw that up there? He explains what this should look like. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. This is like the instruction manual for what's supposed to happen with this, all right? Now, I want you guys to see something. God created sex. He wanted it to be great. He wanted it to be fun and pleasurable, but he also understood that sex is powerful, okay? Sex is powerful. it makes some huge impacts. That's why everything we're talking about how it's been twisted and manipulated and why people are so torn up inside is because Satan has gotten his hands in there and he tries to make everyone think that he created sex, like he invented it, was his idea, like rock and roll and sex and drugs, and that was all his idea. But God's the one who designed it. God's the one who made it in this beautiful, perfect way. And so let's look at something else that's powerful. If sex is powerful, here's something else. Let's say that you decide to walk into Home Depot, okay? It probably won't work at your age, but like your dad walks into Home Depot, and he's like, I'm gonna get a chainsaw, because a chainsaw seems like a powerful thing, right? So he's gonna get this chainsaw, and he goes up to the guy, and he's like, I would like to buy this, sir. Now, that person is first gonna make sure that your dad has at least a rudimentary idea of how safety works. And if you look at chainsaws, you're gonna see these warnings on there, you're gonna see caution stickers, you're gonna see all these explanations, because that chainsaw in the wrong hands is dangerous. It is so powerful that it can be very damaging. Now, does the thought go through your mind when you look at that Home Depot worker, are you like, man, Home Depot hates me. Home Depot is trying to ruin my fun and steal everything that I like. I know it sounds silly, but this is what we do with God sometimes. No, the guy at Home Depot is trying to make sure that you don't chop your freaking arm off. That's his goal in this, because he understands that the stakes are high. He understands that this is dangerous. And here's the deal. The rules are there to keep you safe. And when God created this beautiful thing of sex and wanted it to be great, he understood that it was both fun and pleasurable, but it was powerful. So he gave them that verse, that rule. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother, and the woman should also do that, leave her father and mother, and then they should be joined together, and they shall become one flesh. And just like the pineapple story, because it's secret, because it's special, because it's just this unique club of you and your spouse, it can be precious, and there's no comparisons, and you can fully enjoy that relationship, that love, for the rest of your life. There's a reason that God wants you to understand this so that you can be healthy, okay? So, here's how I want to wrap this up. Well, one last point. Can you put that verse up there one more time? Last point I want to say before I'm going to invite the worship team up right now. See the last two words? And they shall become one flesh. And they shall become one flesh. We're going to talk more about all this stuff in the coming weeks, but I want to make this point because it's really important. Sex is not just physical, no matter how much you try to make it, and how apps like Tinder and things like pornography try to portray sex as a purely physical thing. But the way that God designed you is that when you come together with another person, that these are two souls coming together, that they would become one flesh. And there's this example, I didn't bring it right now, and I used to hear this a lot when I was your guys' age, but it's an example of two pieces of cardboard. Some of you guys have heard this before. Two pieces of cardboard, right? One's you, one's the other person. And when you have sex, it's like you take these two pieces of cardboard and you glue them together and you stick them together, and everything seems great, everything's fun. But then the relationship divides, or it was just a hookup, so you never intended to ever see each other again in the first place. And what happens when you try to remove those two pieces of cardboard? It's not clean. It's not perfect on the middle. Both sides get ripped and torn and broken in that. Because God didn't ever plan on sex being a casual thing. It's meant to be the most intimate connection that you and your spouse can ever have. So, in conclusion, my goal is for those of you who haven't had sex yet, those of you who haven't given into pornography, those of you guys that are at a place where you're like, well, I haven't done that yet. Maybe I've been curious about it. Maybe people at school have been talking about it. I want you to look at this in such a way that you don't have to experience it or test it or try it to find out if it's bad or not. Please take some advice from an older brother, and I would love to see you guys regret-proof your marriages, regret-proof your marriage beds. At the same time, I want to say to every person in this room who feels like they've gone too far or done stuff they're ashamed of, and I don't care at what level that is, whether it's something you looked at, whether it's something you did with another person, it doesn't matter. You have to understand this, that God can redeem your story in every way. And when we talk about purity and sexual purity, I love this word integrity, Because you need to understand that no matter how far you've gone, no matter what you've done that you're ashamed of or you feel like you've screwed up with, God can repair, God can redeem, and God can restore your integrity. We're going to be talking more about this in the coming weeks. Would you guys please pray with me? Jesus, I thank you for your incredible love, God, and I thank you that we can talk boldly about this stuff at church. It feels weird to do it, but Lord, it's something that you've created. It's something that if it's not a safe place for us to talk about sex at church, that just seems like a dangerous, dangerous thing. Lord, you care about this. You care about our relationships. You care about our hearts, and you care about our integrity. And God, I pray that you would just build in us this desire to live lives that would honor you. And I do pray for every person in this room who's just feeling a little dirty right now, feeling a little like they have screwed up too much. Lord, I pray that you would comfort them with your forgiveness. Convince them, Lord, that what you did on the cross by dying for their sins is more than enough to pay for any sin that they have ever committed. There's forgiveness in the cross. There's freedom in your love, God, and I thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.